Yo, what's up? Welcome to PS I Love You XOXO episode 73. I'm one of your hosts, Blessing Adeoye Jr. Joining me is Tim fucking Gettys.
Let Tim host. Greg Miller's not here because it's a cool boy summer, baby. Here we are. Can't wait to talk about Ratchet and Clank with you, gentlemen. And here's the deal, Bless. I have made very few appearances on PS I Love You over the years. Maybe a handful, right? And I always forget how much of a freaking certified slap that theme song is.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I don't necessarily need to take credit for a lot of things in my life, but there are some things that I'm like, I need full credit for. And me commissioning that theme song being made and giving explicit direction on where I wanted each sound effect, that is my greatest work, my greatest accomplishment. And I thank you all for being a part of it.
Tim, I appreciate the cool boy summer, but I hear it's thought boy summer. So just just get ready for
it. Whatever type of boy you want to be, it's your summer as long as it's respectful, right?
Wow.
Like, let's be respectful boys out here. Anyways, on with the show.
First of all, you were 1000% correct that is the best theme song that we have on this channel by far. It's beautiful. 2, I love the sunglasses. I love that you're celebrating Hot Boy Summer. Good for you. I love to see it. I'm also celebrating Hot Boy Summer, which is why I bought that jean jacket that I've been wearing. And so me and you will celebrate together going forward. And then speaking of Hot Boys, we're joined by Steve Saylor, aka the Blind Gamer.
I mean, sure, I'll take the Hot Boys moniker. Yeah, I mean that works for me. I was like, wait, do I go get my sunglasses or my jean jacket? Because I can do that too.
That's the thing. I mean, Steve, it's all about how you feel. There's no requirements. There's no outfit. It's just be you, do you. Just be respectful.
Yeah, Hot Boy Summer is a state of mind. Hot Boy Summer is a state of mind. The one rule is be respectful. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. You were recently on IGN. I want to shout that out off the top so people know where they can check out some of your Ratchet thoughts. We're gonna get more of those here. But yeah, you're here to talk about accessibility with Ratchet and Clank and your impressions, and you're here to help us answer questions like you were here for Eternal. And so thank you for being a returning guest. No pun intended. Hey, and I want to waste no time because we got to get into it. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is about to come out. The review's out. Remember, this is PS I Love You XOXO, your PlayStation podcast. Each and every week, we join you to talk about the biggest topics in PlayStation. If you like that, you can watch it live right here as we record on patreon.com/kindafunnygames, or you can watch it on Tuesday when it posts for everyone on youtube.com/kindafunnygames and on podcast services around the globe. Except for this week, we're posting it on Wednesday because Housekeeping, Tuesday morning, we dropped our Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart review Gamescast episode featuring Greg Miller, Joey Noel, Tim Gettys, Andy Cortez, and Paris Lilly, and myself.
It was a banger.
And so you can go check that out.
Great.
It was a banger. And this episode of PS Love You XOXO is almost like a part 2 to that, because of course that was were all of our initial impressions. That was our deep dive review. That was all of us discussing our feelings on the game. Of course, this episode of PS Love You XOXO is going to be all about your questions being answered, because right after that review dropped, we made a call to action. Of course, you guys killed it like you always do. Roll in with your questions. We're going to answer all of those right here. But before we do, thank you to our Patreon producers, Donovan Harkness, Omega3, Tyler Ross, Delaney Twinning, Julian the Gluten-Free Gamer, James Hastings, Casey Andrew, and Elliot. Today we're brought to you by Purple Mattress, Upstart, and Candid, but I'll tell you about that later. For now, let's begin with topic of the show. So like I said, this is our Ratchet and Clank Q&A. And I know people wrote in with a lot of questions. I do want to start off with Steve, though. Steve, I haven't heard your thoughts on Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. And so where are you at with that game? Catch us up. What is your review?
So yeah, I rolled credits on it this past weekend, and I will say it is probably the most gorgeous game that I've played. I think Paris said it in your review. I think it was like it's like if Pixar made a video game. It's just that well polished. The animation, the storytelling is really great. I think it basically, like, what I loved about Insomniac, what they did was like, okay, you know what? We've got this PS5, we've got this new console. Let's just throw everything at it and just see how much it can handle. And I think it was able to do that in spades. And this is definitely one of those like system sellers, I think, in that sense. And the fact that they technically now have 2 system sellers with Miles Morales and Ratchet goes to show how good Insomniac is. As far as the accessibility side, there are definitely a lot there. I mean, we're definitely talking in sort of like the echelon of what, say, The Last of Us had in regards to how many options. There are definitely some tweaks that I think can be made. that's not necessarily a detriment to the fact that that they did put a lot of effort into the accessibility. I think there's my particular sort of accessibility sort of nitpicks are kind of things that I hope that Insomniac will be able to do. Basically, there's a lot of nuts and bolts. Pardon the pun.
Hey.
There's a lot of nuts and bolts. They just need to be tightened a little bit when it comes to accessibility. And I will say that there's definitely some accessibility options that I would probably not have been able to play this game if it wasn't for some of the options. And I think we'll talk about that actually in a little bit. But with one of the questions I saw. But yeah, it's one of those it can be difficult, but it can also be it's also very fun to play. And there were options that I actually have never really used in games before that I've seen in other accessibility options in games, and I was like, it was really well implemented, and it works great. I would definitely recommend it just for accessibility alone, and Sony's definitely been cranking those out over the past year. Actually, year now, as of The Last of Us will be within a week. So yeah.
Yeah, before I even get into the questions, my question for you is, were there any options in Rift Apart that were brand new for you that you hadn't seen out of accessibility in a game before? Or were the options that were there mainly things that felt they were very iterative or learning from previous games that came before it?
I would say about probably 85% are options that we've seen in other games before. It's just this is one of the few times that we actually get to see all those options in one game. I think the one that I have seen before, but it was I liked the way that they were able to implement was the game speed option. When I heard about it after the preview, it was like, okay, that's cool, but I probably would never be able to use it. And we've seen it in as far back as games like Celeste, within their assist mode, you can be able to slow down the game speed to about 50%. With this, you can be able to set it from 70, 50 to 30%. And that was the only way I was ever actually be able to do any combat or any sort of fast chase sequences or platforming sequences, because that alone was enough that I was like, okay, it gives me enough time to be able to react to certain things and be able to actually complete those sections. For combat, being able to dodge missiles and any sort of pulse beams that are being shot at you, it just makes it a lot more comfortable and easier for me to be able to play without feeling very overwhelmed. Because that's the thing, there's a lot happening on screen. It's gorgeous, but there it can be a lot of noise depending on if you have a specific either visual or cognitive disability. So there is going to be a lot that's in there, but there are some options that I think that can help, stuff like game speed, high contrast mode, auto aim, auto target lock. There's stuff like that we've seen in other games, but the way that they were able to implement it into Ratchet and Clank is just really, really good. I think just a little bit of tweaking for pretty much, I'd say all of them would after launch would definitely be something I would that I would hope would happen. But again, it's just sort of quality of life issues that I think at that point.
So I didn't check out any of these the accessibility stuff for me, but I'm interested in this game speed thing. How does that affect the sound of the game? Does sound slow down as well?
No, actually. So stuff like dialogue and sort of whenever enemies are talking at or as they're shooting at you, they don't slow down at all. And even the missiles and stuff like that they are shooting at you, they're not shooting in slow motion, which is great. And actually, if you're wondering, does that affect the sort of frame rate? From what I've been able to see, no, it doesn't. I think it maybe lags a little bit when it's sort of switching between, obviously, when you're hitting a rift, and it kind of will I've seen maybe one or two sort of frame drops or a little bit of lag, but even in performance RT mode, which I was able to play with a little bit once they kind of released the day one patch for me to be able to try out, it was smooth. The slow motion was just if you really want to appreciate the animation in everything in Ratchet, try on slow motion or game speed, because you really get to appreciate how well those animations are and just how smooth it is. So yeah, I would definitely recommend. I think probably the best mode playing it is performance ray tracing mode. You get the beauty of the 60 frames per second plus the ray tracing. It's pretty much for me, it basically became I should have played this the entire time because I absolutely loved it.
Absolutely, and that's how I played it. Just for everybody to know, I beat the game twice now. platinumed it, 100%ed it, did all that stuff. The first time I played was in fidelity mode, and the second time I played was in the RT performance mode. And undeniably, go with the RT performance mode. You really don't lose anything with losing out on that resolution. You don't notice because everything, the art design is just so fantastic. And Steve, you were talking about the animation and how in slow-mo not slow-mo. Well, yeah, I guess it is slow-mo. You really kind of appreciate all the stuff going into it. And that's something we didn't really talk about on our review on Gamescast, but even just the simple movements that Ratchet and Rivet and Clank, everybody makes, is so impressive to me. And the different ways he jumps and flips, like, it feels very fluid, and it feels like it's not canned animations, even though it is canned animations. It's just the way that, like, it kind of feels like the level design and the characters themselves interact with each other in such a perfect way that, like, it's fluid and it feels right. So even though every time you flip to the side, he's doing the same flip, the way the shadows and lighting works and just everything working together makes it feel like a unique motion that's happening for the first time there. And like that's something that I don't think I've experienced in this type of art style game before. I think the closest we've seen has been Last of Us 2, with the way that the animations felt so dynamic to the world that they were in, even though a lot of them were just the same animations we've seen in other environments before.
Yeah, and I would say, like, even just from my perspective, like, and I could 100% be wrong because, again, I am blind, so that definitely is something that it could be the case. But I don't think I ever even really noticed when the animation sort of like just like, you know how we have it where it just stops and then all of a sudden you're like in a different position in certain games. This one, it felt like it was very, like, even in slow motion, like, it was very smooth that when you're flipping, yeah, it's the same animation, but when you land and then you immediately do something else, it doesn't like it's not like it just all of a sudden cuts to the new animation. It's just like it's so
and there's
fluid.
No stutter step. It's very impressive, because you keep going in the same flow. But like Ratchet is doing all these flips and all these tricks and stuff, and the transitions into each next animation just goes so smooth that it feels like it is all part of one movement, which is really impressive. And to what you're talking about before, right, with being able to notice all the different details in the game by even having it slow motion, that's one thing that I didn't really think about as much. Like, that's one thing where in a lot of the action in Ratchet and Clank does go through really quickly. And the weapon I'll shout out in this is the Enforcer, where the Enforcer I describe as basically a ray tracing gun, where it's a shotgun weapon that fires out these almost like lightning bolt shaped blasts. And in practice, it is a weapon purely made to show off ray tracing because it has a light effect that shines on everything around it. I would love to see that in slow motion. Like, that seems like something that you would be able to appreciate way more in the slow motion mode.
It looks gorgeous. I mean, the lighting effects in pretty much all the weapons that you have just look really, really good. And you don't really, when you're playing it at normal speed, like, everything is moving fast and everything is kind of like just, you're having to try to be able to react it like very quickly. But when you're kind of in slow-mo, you kind of get to appreciate a little bit of the combat that you're in, even though it is a very fast-paced kind of combat situation. And yeah, the Enforcer one is probably the weapon I use the most because there's a lot of times where enemies will kind of come at you, and I wish there was like some sort of like indicator of if they're coming at you from behind, which is something that definitely is an accessibility issue. But essentially that Enforcer just allowed me to kind of like just really like go nuts around any enemies that are around me. And even though I couldn't, because of just all the lighting effects that were happening on screen, there was a lot that was going on. I knew that I was at least hitting some of the enemies, but it was just it can be a lot, but even in slow motion. But for me, it was just enough that I was just like, okay, all I need to do is just dodge and jump out of the way, because there was also the ability to be able to have auto aim and target lock. So essentially all I had to do was just hold the aim button and then just spam trigger, and it will make sure that it always made sure that it hit its target. I think the Headhunter is probably the only weapon that it's definitely better if you're able to get a headshot, which I wasn't able to do a lot. But it was the one time actually, and normally in these kind of games, when you have like a whole bunch of like different wild and wacky weapons, I would normally pick like maybe one or two, and then I'm just like, I'm going to use those throughout the entire game. This is the first time that I've ever been able to play a game that I actually got to use pretty much a majority of all the weapons that I had available to me. And because there'll be times I want to use a Shatter Bomb, or I want to use the Enforcer, or the Warmonger, or Ricochet, or even just your basic pulse rifle. Like, it was everything that I was using everything, and it was each weapon had its use for each different situation that you were in, and it was just a blast to be able to play. And this is my first Ratchet game ever, so to me, this was like it was a lot of fun. It was difficult, but it was definitely still a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, Ratchet and Clank 2016, I think, had a similar gameplay loop, but it definitely feels way more refined in this one because of the assortment of weapons they have this time around. Like, they feel way more diverse in some ways. And then, yeah, that gameplay loop of, for me, the thing was always, okay, cool, I'm in a battle, I'm going to bust out the topiary sprinkler. Cool, now I'm going to bust out Mr. Fungi. Cool, now I'm going to bust out, like, another weapon that'll be a passive weapon, like the Glove of Doom, for example. I'll bust that out, and now I'm just going to, like, switch to my Enforcer. Like, I very much had a
out here.
Yeah, I'm like, good luck.
Dude, totally, man. Like that is the brilliance of Ratchet and Clank games, and it always has been. But I think that this game kind of makes it even more of a visual spectacle than it's ever been, where you feel like a badass at all moments. And what Steve was talking about is like each weapon feels great. Each weapon has its kind of use case. But what I like and very much enjoy about this iteration of Ratchet and Clank is every weapon feels like there might be situations where one's better than the other, but all weapons are equally viable at all times in every battle. And I really, really thought that was cool, where there were weapons that were more fun to use than others, but there weren't weapons that I was bummed out that I had to use for a bit because that was the only thing that had ammo. Everything was always fun, and everything made me feel like a badass from beginning to end of this game. I felt powered up, but it felt fun and challenging still. It wasn't like I'm just running through, mowing people down, like onto the next thing, like, oh, this isn't interesting. It was like every single encounter was rewarding for the power trip it gave me, right? And it's like it was that really good balance of cause and effect of me taking action, fucking these people's days up, and all the bolts coming at you afterwards. Like, it feels so empowering. It's so good to get those bolts.
Yeah, and they're really fun too. Like, again, I think probably my favorite, just like every time I laugh every time I see it, was the ricochet. When like nothing is funnier than just seeing like enemies literally getting bounced around from left to right as you're just pounding them like with this ricochet gun. I was just like off of the distance, I would like, there's some pretty large enemies in this game, and just like I would fire it once, and then it just like you just keep hitting the trigger button to be able to like kind of keep ricocheting back and forth, and it's just hilarious, the animation every single time. It's like they're getting slapped in the face, but their whole body just kind of moves back and forth. It was great. And yeah, you're right. It's just like every single like weapon made you feel powerful, even kind of at the beginning when you first pick them up. Yeah, you can be able to upgrade them, which is great. And I definitely upgraded a lot and pretty much actually maxed out on a few of them, at least some of my favorite ones. But like even at the end game, like I still felt just as powerful as I did at the beginning of the game.
And another thing that I really like about the weapons is like you were bringing up, how the animations of the enemies. And what I love is there's a consistency across all weapons and all enemy varieties, whether they're the small little grunts coming at you or the giant bosses you're facing. All weapons work on them the exact same way. And that means that each weapon, especially as you start to grow out the skill tree of it, has so many fun custom animations and status effects and ailments and things, where like the topiary sprinkler that you're talking about, Bless, like essentially shoots water, and then if the water hits you, it turns them into like bushes. And it's like you could turn a small enemy into a bush or a giant dinosaur, or like if you shoot the ice blast, the cold blast, I think it was called, at them, and it freezes them in a giant ice cube. The ice cube, no matter how big or small the enemy is, it will affect them the same way. And I really, really enjoyed that, because it just gives a level of consistency that I think a lot of video games miss out on. Like a lot of video games, it's like you'll be shooting a boss and it's just like, all right, cool. The weapon like might be like flashing red or something like on their weak point, but it's not doing the same thing it would to a smaller enemy. But here it really does feel like Ratchet is up against the world and can take everybody on, and it's really cool.
While we're on this topic of weapons and the weapon variety, I have a question here from Chris, who writes into patreon.com/kindafunnygames, just like you can, and says, "Hey guys, I'm new to the Ratchet and Clank series, as I just played and beat my first game recently with 2016. One thing that frustrated me was the constant running out of ammo throughout. While I understand the game is trying to encourage use of different weapons, it put me in situations where the weapons I was forced to use didn't do anything to help me progress. Has the system changed at all between 2016 to Rift Apart? And what's your best advice for handling the weapons in the new one? Love what you do, guys, and thanks so much. Thank you so much, Chris. For you guys, was running out of ammo ever an issue for you? Was that a thing that ever frustrated you?
In moments it was, but it was never like, oh shoot, I'm just completely out of ammo for everything. There was always at least one or two weapons that I can always switch to until I can be able to find like an ammo box, and which are pretty, I don't know if it changes depending on which difficulty you play at. I played on the, I guess, sort of the normal-ish, which is Rebel, and I didn't really find that an issue. I do know what Chris is talking about, because I did go and play at least the first hour of the 2016 Ratchet, and I did find I actually ran out of ammo quicker in that than I did in this one.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm a Ratchet and Clank fan through and through. Like I was saying this on Gamescast, but I've nearly 100%ed like all of the games. And what I think that these games do very well is they're designed around not using one weapon. It's not about having your favorite that you're decking out and playing the entire game through. There's not enough ammo in the game to do that. Like, they're really trying to incentivize you to switch between all the different weapons and gadgets. And what I think this game does better than a lot of the previous ones. And remember, the 2016 game was based on a 2002 game. So a lot of the weapons and gadgets and stuff, even though they made a lot of advancements, some things weren't as good. But I think at the end of the day, they didn't really change the weapon sets and gadget sets too much. So with that, I think that we just kind of modernize things a lot, where what I appreciate about Rift Apart is a lot of the gadgets you kind of have from the offset, or like as you kind of go through, you get the abilities really quick, like the dodge, which is beautiful, by the way, where it does like this really cool kind of rift effect as he moves. It's like, it just makes it even more fun and engaging, but to look at it and play. But in terms of the weapons, I really think that at its core, the best thing about Ratchet and Clank games is how well they incentivize you to have fun playing with all the weapons and upgrading all of them. And like, I am not typically the type of person that platinums video games. I love platinuming Insomniac games, and it's because of this. It makes all these elements and all of the things that you're upgrading really fun. And to do that in Ratchet and Clank, I'm the type of player that literally just goes gun by gun and focuses on one till I upgrade it as much as possible, move on to the next. And doing that allows you to have a plethora of ammo for a bunch of different weapons. So you're not focused on upgrading just this one thing and not having options. Because as you're trying to do just this one, if you run out of ammo, move to the next one. And if you run out of ammo, that move to the next one. And then the game does a really good job about dynamically making sure that the ammo that you're opening in the wild is for a weapon that you're kind of looking for. I don't know how they do that, but all the ammo boxes are the same crate. But depending on what weapon you've previously used, it'll change what ammo is in the crate itself. And I think that they do a good job of kind of hinting at you sometimes to, maybe you want to be using the Headhunter sniper rifle here, because they'll give you some of that ammo. And those moments, I think, are really special and more unique to Rift Apart than the previous games.
Yeah, I think the thing for me with the ammo situation that helps a lot is that the weapon variety is so good that none of the weapons feel useless or feel like weapons that I don't want to use in a situation. You know, like usually if I have ammo left in 3 weapons, like only three weapons, those 3 weapons will get me by. Or there is a good balance of gameplay where I can find more ammo. Like they always have ammo boxes around for the most part. And if you run out of ammo boxes, the ammo boxes will respawn, especially if you're like down to the wire in terms of ammo. They never leave you hanging in that regard. But for me, like in the switching around the guns, like the loop is very similar to 2016 for the person who's asking the question. The loop is the exact same in terms of the way you're rotating between guns, but I think overall the guns are better, and so it's less of an issue. Because in 2016 I did have that thing where I'm like, all right, I like the pixelizer more than I like every other gun, and so I'd rather just keep using the pixelizer. All right, cool. I guess I'm out of the pixelizer. I'll use the Glove of Doom. All right, the Glove of Doom isn't really doing it for this situation. Like I never really had that. And the thing I also say about this game and its design, this game also doesn't have the moments where you are flying through air, and that means that you can't use half of your weapons because you're doing a boss fight that's in midair. That was the thing that would happen in 2016 a lot. There were quite a few boss fights. I think it was like Ms. Zircon, for example, in Ratchet and Clank 2016, where you are flying all over the place, and that means you can't use weapons like Glove of Doom, or you can't use weapons that do require a lot of passive stuff. This game doesn't have that. This game does a good job of allowing any weapon to work in any moment.
And on top of that, Bless, we were talking about this on the Gamescast, but I think that they do a really good job with the quantity and of weapons that they have, where like I don't know exactly how many there are, but I want to say like what, 15, something like that, maybe a little less than that, 12, 15. So what doesn't matter. My point is, we were talking about how there's kind of like archetypes of weapons where there's like the Glove of Doom is very similar to Miss Fungi in the sense of what it's actually doing, but it's visually different and has the slight differences between it, where I think that even if you run out of ammo with one of the things, they do a good job of giving you another similar thing to use.
Exactly.
So it never really feels like, again, it's about incentivizing you to use all the different weapons and to give you more fun things to upgrade. And I like that they kind of focused on a couple things that really work well for the gameplay in this game and give you multiple options to consistently have the fun going, where the pacing of this game's fun is probably only matched by like Nintendo EAD projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like what you mentioned too about it almost feels like there's a weapon class system without there being rigorous classes. You know, like they do such a good job of like the blast pistol that you start off with is like a straight up just like regular laser gun type thing. But then they also give you the lightning rod, which works pretty much the exact same way, but does have a twist on it that makes it unique, that makes it fun to use separately from the regular blast pistol. But if we run out of ammo in one, it doesn't hurt to use the other because they work the same way, and they're gonna get the same job done, which is what I really like.
Yeah, and I think even for me, like, because it's the first time I really got to, like, I played a game where I was constantly switching weapons, you'll start to kind of figure out a strategy of what weapons do best in what situation. Like, the Enforcer is great for if you're just all of a sudden surrounded and you just need to kind of, like, get rid of them, like as many people as possible as you're trying to dodge out of the way from the bigger dudes. But then there are weapons that are just like, say, the Warmonger, where essentially like those are you can use them on any of the regular enemies, but they're like they would do really great in big bosses and stuff like that. Like you start to kind of like realize, okay, what these weapons are better used for, and then you start to kind of like. Yeah, exactly. Allows you to
the Warmonger, I would save that Warmonger ammo, right? Like the Warmonger was one where I'm like, okay, I'm keeping this for special occasions when I need to really take down a dude. Whereas other weapons, I don't want to name all the weapons because I think some of them later on are surprises. So I'm only naming weapons that I've seen in previews and stuff. But there would be certain weapons where I'm like, cool, I'm always using this weapon in a group combat scenario. Like this will be my go-to here. This will be my go-to here. And I really like that variety and that choice in the gameplay there. I want to bring in another question from Emmett Watkins Jr., the homie, who writes in and says, on Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, with the platinum not requiring 100% to get, is it still a satisfying platinum to get? A big reason I love doing everything in Spider-Man is because I was rewarded in-game and through trophies. Are the rewards in-game good enough to offset the fact that I'll have a platinum well before hitting 100%? Also, without spoiling anything, is this story substantially more engaging than the narrative pinnacle of the series, A Crack in Time? And is it worth playing it or other earlier games to fully appreciate the narrative of this new title? Thanks a bunch, y'all. Have a wonderful E3. Starting with the first question, Tim, I know you've platinumed the game. Steve, have you platinumed the game?
I have not, but I'm definitely going to go for the platinum. I'm about 61% all trophies completed right now. And I think the only reason why I'm at that level is because it was difficult at times to be able to try to find the certain collectibles for certain things that you would need for some of the trophies. And it wasn't until essentially that kind of got minor spoiler like that got unlocked a little bit later on that I was like, okay, now I can go and be able to start going down the collections path. But the thing with Insomniac, that what I love that they do is that their platinum trophy is in a way both approachable and accessible. My very first platinum ever was in Marvel Spider-Man, and it was approachable, it was fun, and it was like it wasn't a huge amount of skill based. To be able to get, and it's like, yeah, there's certain things you have to do that you have to learn how to be able to kind of do properly, especially like those Taskmaster challenges but the thing is, with to get that trophy, you only need a silver level to be able to kind of get. So it's like Insomniac knows all that, and they are at least able to make it approachable. And to me, I actually think it's the probably most accessible trophy list that I've ever come across, because I platinum Marvel Spider-Man. I'm one trophy away from platinuming Miles Morales, and I'm probably going to platinum this too. And that's 3 Insomniac games that I've never been close to a platinum in any other game. And those are 3 right there that I'm just like, I'm already ready to be able to go in and platinum. And yeah, it's been great.
Insomniac games have, I think, the gameplay that will make you want to platinum something. You know, I think their gameplay loop is very much geared toward, hey, like the act of playing this game, like the pure act of touching the controller in this game is fun by itself. You know, and it's the kind of game where you just look for more things to do, right? After you beat the game. I'm usually a person that when it comes to platinuming it, or when it comes to platinuming any game, it usually comes down to, do I want to still keep playing? Yep. Oftentimes when I beat a game, I'm like, cool, that was fun. I'm good with this. I'm going to move on to the next thing. There are rare cases for me, like Shadow of Mordor was one where I beat it and I was like, I really want to keep playing this game. What else can I do? And I went for the platinum. Spider-Man being another case of, I finished this game. I really want to keep playing. What am I going to do? I'm going to get the platinum, because the gameplay loop inherently is just so fun. And so this one isn't any different. I'm like you, Steve, where I've not gotten the platinum yet. I am on my way to getting the platinum. I think I'm gonna get it because I'm close enough. I have 72% trophy progress, and weirdly enough, I'm pretty sure I'm at like over 90% game completion. And I don't know exactly how it counts all this stuff, because I'm still missing quite a few like gold bolts and some things, but I've obviously completed the story, and then also I've completed all of the main side objectives in the game, and I've collected quite a few things outside of that as well. And so I'm higher on completion percentage than trophy percentage, but
yeah, same.
I think the thing
same with me.
The thing that this trophy list does well, and this is mentioned yesterday during the review as well, is that the trophy list does not require completion of every collectible. It does push you to at least collect some of every collectible, which one, makes it not as big of a hassle, but then also makes it so that the purpose of the trophy list is incentivizing you to get a taste of everything. And that is a kind of trophy list that I really liked. Persona 5 Royal had a similar kind of trophy list, where that's another game I platinumed, and that trophy list felt very much geared towards experience all the new things that Persona 5 Royal has in the game. Experience all the cool events, experience all the cool new activities. They just want you to experience the game. Experience the game fully, get a taste for everything. And once you get a taste for everything, boom, there's platinum. I like those kinds of platinums because they feel like they have purpose. But for you, Tim, as somebody who has platinum the game, where are you at with the platinum? Is it still satisfying to get, even though it doesn't require 100% for you?
I love every question that Emmett has here, and I feel like I'm happy on this episode to answer the questions as a huge Ratchet and Clank fan, because I want to start with the narrative part of this first.
Okay.
I do think that he said the narrative pinnacle of the series, A Crack in Time. And he says, is the story substantially more engaging than that one? Definitely not. A Crack in Time is still, I think, the pinnacle, and I think it's by a pretty long shot. Having said that, the story in this game is great, and I think that the characters are fantastic. I think that in a lot of ways, it is the most modernized version of Ratchet and Clank we've had, and just the way characters interact and like some of the emotional beats and things like that. But it is really a retread. We've seen this story before. We're going to keep seeing it again. And there wasn't really any story beat that was interesting. It was just kind of like, yeah, okay, cool. I'm into this. I get what's happening. But there wasn't ever a moment that I'm like, oh, wow, that's a cool thing they're doing. Whereas A Crack in Time, that was constant. And I think A Crack in Time really... A Crack in Time on PS3 reminded me of like the MCU getting into Thor Ragnarok territory, where it's like, we've done a lot of these other things before and they were good, but like now let's get a little more weird. And I really appreciated that. And this game doesn't do that at all. But the characters, I think, are 10 out of 10 across the board. Going back to the platinum stuff, I loved getting the platinum in this game, and Bless, you were talking about it, but there's, I would say, 4 or 5 different collectible type things you need to get. I love that there's not too many of any of them. There's 25 gold bolts. There's like 10 of this thing, 12 of that thing. It's not hundreds of things everywhere, and they're kind of all put in really great level designed places. And to get the trophies for the majority of them, it is get 3 of them, get 5 of them. Like Bless was saying, get this taste to incentivize all the different gameplay that the game has to offer. And I think that they did a really, really good job of making it satisfying to beat the game, satisfying to platinum the game, and satisfying to 100% the game. Having that 3rd level, I did that. I went back and I wanted to get all of everything. And they don't really give you too much for doing it, but what they give you is the fun of playing. And all the different modes, for the most part, are extremely fun. all the way to the end of collecting these. I think there's one trophy, like I was saying, the little bears, the collectible bears. That is the one trophy that you have to get all of them. And there's only 11, I want to say, or 9 maybe. There's not many of them, but it's the only collectible the game doesn't help you out or give you tips or hints on where they are and like put them on the map or something, and even have that as an option. And I think that was a big mistake. I think that kind of is the one trophy that isn't purely from the game telling you what to do and how to play it and teaching you, available to you, and you kind of like need a guide to be able to complete that. And like that's kind of a bummer, to Steve's point about accessibility and how just kind of fun and inherently productive the trophy list is, where like you're popping trophies just playing the way you naturally would play the game, and then there's the trophies pushing you to that next level of wanting to keep going. But I think that even post platinum, I had a blast upgrading every single weapon, so I had the entire skill tree, so it was fully leveled up, so that Ratchet was fully leveled up. Once you beat the game, you unlock challenge mode, which is New Game Plus, and I beat the entire game again. I didn't need to do that. That is not part of the platinum. I just wanted to, because I was like, I want to level up my weapons, and instead of just going to the arena and grinding over and over, I'm just going to play through the game again, because I want to, and the game has so many fun moments and so many fun encounters that it really, again, I keep using the word incentivizes. This is the best incentivizing game I've ever had to have fun and to want to keep going and keep playing, doing the same things over and over. And another thing I really want to give a shout out to in terms of 100%ing, in terms of platinuming, this game does a great job of allowing you to jump in exactly where you need to go in a level, exactly to the encounter you want to be, without wasting your time. And if you want to skip puzzles, you can skip puzzles. You're not at all getting in trouble for that, or getting dinged.
It feels like it's designed for a gamer who doesn't have time to waste. Like a gamer that really wants to keep going.
I mean, like technically, yes, I agree with you in that. It just in general, those can definitely help out. I love the fact you both took a drink at the same time. Yes, it can help you out if you just don't have the time, or you just don't want to be able to skip them. But actually as well, like that is an accessibility option. That's something that was something that we started to kind of see in the accessibility community of games being able to do that, because they understand, like developers are kind of starting to understand that not every person can be able to cognitively or visually or audibly like be able to know how to be able to complete the puzzle. And for myself, even like I'm okay at puzzles. I can generally figure them out, and I've rarely ever had the need to be able to skip a puzzle. I think probably I will say, like without even really any spoiler, like I think the last one is the only one that I skipped, because literally I was just like, I could not figure it out. Now, granted, I was drinking a lot of wine that night when I was trying to finish up the game, so that could have had an issue with it too. However, I think that the fact that it's there is something that it definitely helps. They had that in The Last of Us 2, whenever there was sort of some of the traversal sort of puzzles that you come across, you can be able to skip those, which is nice. But I think yes, that's the one thing I love about accessibility, is that it's technically built for something that's accessibility minded, but can benefit everyone else, like you too, like where you're just like, yeah, you know what? I don't want to do this right now. I'll just skip it and I'll be good. That being said, I actually did enjoy the puzzles technically. Like I think the little glitch that you have, I think that's the most charming character in the entire game. And there is an accessibility issue with that, because you generally have to like the way that sort of like you climb walls and through ceilings, and the way that the camera is like can get you motion sick, and that's probably still like I wish that would have changed, but I really enjoyed that little aspect to it. And I don't know, it was just like stuff like that. Like I know you can skip, but I did enjoy the little tiny story that I actually didn't expect to see in that little little puzzles.
That's a good point. Yeah, but to be clear, like I played through all the puzzles. It's just the second time going back, like trying to play through and whatever. I just love that it's just like skipping cutscenes. Like we've been complaining about cutscenes not being skippable for generations, like since the PS2. And it's like whenever a game would have that, it was always like, thank you. And I feel like just now it's just that should be standard, that's there. And there's all these things because of accessibility and because of just the way people play games that I like that, especially when it looks like PlayStation Studios as a whole, they're starting to come up with some standards of expectations on different modes and how they benefit the game experience for players of many different types.
Yeah. I want to keep talking about story since Emmett brought up the Crack in Time comparison, because for me, I'm somebody who I've not played Crack in Time, and so like I've never really played Ratchet and Clank for story necessarily. You know, like I do play for the writing and the characters and the jokes. I think Ratchet and Clank has a really fun vibe. But coming out of this game, like I like the story a lot, but I did want to see a little bit more out of it. And so like Tim, hearing you saying that it didn't necessarily hit the heights of something like Crack in Time that felt like it was doing something like unique and special. I'm pretty much aligned with you there, where there wasn't really a point where I was like, oh snap, I didn't see this coming, or there wasn't really a twist, there wasn't really any sort of like, I don't know, moment that stuck out to me in the story, like, and just in terms of narrative structure or the story they're telling. There are jokes that stuck out to me. There are fun moments, but not necessarily like big moments or surprising moments necessarily, which I was wanting a bit more of. But Steve, for you, like, how did the story land for you? Did you really enjoy it?
Yeah, as like I said, this is my first Ratchet game, so I don't know the lore of the past, I guess, 20 years of this franchise. However, it was like, I do find that if those are wondering, like, if you've never played Ratchet before, is this a good game to be able to pick up and play? I would say 100%, because there's definitely, I can tell that there's some Easter eggs and there's some characters in there that I could just tell that they're probably part of previous games that make an appearance in here. But they were able to kind of at least catch you up, or at least tell you enough that, okay, like it doesn't sort of detract from the story, or like you feel like you're missing something, like to kind of keep the story moving forward. That being said, I think probably characters wise, I actually enjoyed, I guess would be the new characters than I did of Ratchet and Clank. I liked them. They were great. I think that like the way that they kind of interact and the story between the two of them are great. But I really, really loved Grivet. I was really impressed. Like, Jennifer Hale is just amazing as this character. And I won't say any others because for spoilers, but it's just like that's where I resonated and felt like I enjoyed the story the most, was when I got to sort of explore the new characters in this game. And yeah, definitely, I would say it doesn't hit in as far as like a masterpiece storytelling, as it were, as something I really connected with, say something like Miles Morales or in Spider-Man. I think it's a good story, and I think it kind of, as much as I said at the beginning, it's like if Pixar made a video game, I mean, that's kind of the good description, is that Pixar's not necessarily for everybody. They try to, for making it for kids and for adults, and there's definitely moments in here that hit for both, but it's not exactly hitting the great storytelling that Pixar has been known in the past to do. So it's kind of like in that sort of stance of a Pixar movie for me. So it's good. I enjoyed it.
I do think you hit the good point, though, that it is a story that anybody can jump in and understand and feel like they're not lost in, because there have been a lot of Ratchet and Clank games over the year, right? Like over the years they've been putting out Ratchet and Clank games since 2002, which means that there is a lot of history you could catch up on when it comes to Ratchet and Clank. But even jumping into Rift Apart and, you know, seeing returning characters like Skid McMarks and seeing twists on those characters and things introduced, I never once was like, okay, who's this guy I've never seen before, and what is like, even when I met characters that I wasn't completely familiar with, I still felt like I still felt like I was along for the ride and understood who that character was. Like, nothing felt super complicated or super deep, which I think is nice to have, especially for an early PlayStation 5 exclusive that is so far probably the most mainstream PS5 only exclusive that they released for the console. So many people are going to be jumping into this, and so it's nice to be able to jump in at any level and be able to enjoy it. I want to pull in another question from Justin B, who wrote in to say, how is the Ratchet
Justin Bieber? You think Justin
1000%. You think the Beeves listen? He finished making his latest album, Purpose. I forget. Actually, no, Purpose was like an earlier one. He finished making his latest album, Justice. Justice is what it was. He finished making Justice, and he was like, I want to go listen to PS I Love You. Hear them talk about some of that young God of War, Ratchet and Clank. Yeah, that's definitely Beebs. He writes in to say, or they write in to say, how is Ratchet and Rivet gameplay split? Is it 50-50? What are the differences between their gameplay and or sections?
I want to say it's like 60-40 Ratchet getting more, and there is absolutely no difference between the gameplay of the characters themselves. They play identically. Your weapon upgrades translate one for one. Like, and they have a couple throwaway lines to explain that story wise, but which I do appreciate. But I really like that your outfits and the armor you're wearing and the colors and all that, you get to customize for each one of them. It doesn't affect your stats or anything; they stay the same. But you can have each one look different if you want them to, which was fun. But yeah, in terms of gameplay, there's unique. I would say that the gameplay changes is more based on level than Ratchet or Rivet.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Ratchet and Rivet play exactly the same, and as you're going through the game, as you level up guns and all that stuff, it still stays on par between the two characters. And like, yeah, they have like throwaway explanations for it, and it harkens back to what Greg mentioned in the Gamescast, which is this is a video game ass video game. You know, like they don't really give too much of a fuck in terms of trying to make things make too much sense. By the time you get there, you're gonna be like, all right, you know, it is what it is. And I like the fact that they went the direction they did with it, because I'm sure they could have made it so that you are leveling up the characters individually. The characters have different weapons that they're rocking rocking different gear, and so when you go back and forth, the gameplay is completely different. But this isn't that type of game. Like, this isn't that. I don't think that's the type of game they want to make. I think that is a different. That is an entirely different experience. Where for this game, it very much is the streamlined. Hey, we're just trying to get you from point A to point B and have as much fun as you can doing it. And I think I think for doing it the way they did, they accomplished that, and it didn't get in the way of Ratchet and Clank, right? It doesn't get in the way of what we know Ratchet and Clank to be, which is I want to keep leveling up my guns. I don't want to think too hard about like what this character has versus what this character has. I want just feel more and more powerful as I go through, and I want to keep shooting shit the way that I like to shoot shit, and the game lets you do that. So I think I liked it that way.
I think technically, like it's like the one thing I liked about it was that when you're playing as each character, like they never sort of feel like tired or like overstay their welcome. Like when you're about ready to be like, okay, let's move on to something else, like you can there's another character you'll be able to like sort of jump into, which is great. And I think that the way that they sort of do it, yeah, there's some throwaway lines, like you said, of just how they're able to have the same amount of upgrades and credits and stuff like that, which is fine. And yeah, it definitely is a video game thing. But to me, I was like, I think that's a good quality of life sort of thing, because it's being able to go back, like it's like, okay, you've upgraded all these weapons for Ratchet, and then having to be able to go in and do the same thing for Rivet. It's just a very time consuming, and be like, oh man, it was just like, why? Like it's just it would be completely. Like, why is this necessary to be able to do this here? Like, I think that cohesion works. And yeah, there's different sort of like gadgets that feel different for each character, even though they do kind of the exact same thing. I think it's just to me, I think you're right about 60-40 is a good sort of split between the two. And but I never felt like I was tired of any of them. I felt it was great and just kind of helped. For me be able to be like, okay, I know I'm going to get the same weapons. I know I'm going to have the same amount of like upgrade points, and it's just going to work for throughout for both. To me, it just like it felt great, and it was just like I kind of like that aspect. I kind of in a way wish more games would do that, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. There was never a point where I was playing as Rivet where I was like, I wish I was playing as Ratchet right now, or vice versa.
Well, I mean, look, I'm with you guys entirely, and I would prefer this over them having different gameplay and it turning into a whole thing. But I do think that the biggest issue that this game has is for it being about Rift Apart and for it being about these two different like Lombaxes and being able to jump between dimensions and stuff. The game doesn't really like satisfy that premise, I think, whatsoever. Like the whole game. It's the only reason there's two characters is because of the plot. And there's no other reason. And it's like, that's okay. And that's fine. And again, it's good, but it's just one of those things where I thought there was going to be a little bit more from a gameplay perspective and definitely from a story perspective of, okay, cool. That's the premise. How are you going to do something cool and interesting with it? And they just don't really ever do that.
Well, Tim, with that, I want to bring in a question from Joseph Hooper, because I think this factors into the conversation we're having. Joseph Hooper from Seattle writes in and says, after having played Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, what do you see as the biggest gameplay benefit of making it a PlayStation 5 exclusive? And even I'm going to pin that question, right? Keep that in mind. I want to also bring in another question that I was going to save for PlayStation updates when we get into the God of War conversation, but I'll bring it in because this does pertain to what we're talking about as well. Tyler Ross writes in and says, "Hey guys, loved hearing the lauded endorsement of Ratchet on the Gamescast this morning. I was looking forward to the game, but y'all have pushed my anticipation into overdrive. With Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart serving as one of the few PS5 exclusives we have to date, do you think its PS5 exclusivity had a significant impact on the scope and execution of this game? How has this game, a AAA PS5 exclusive, impacted your views on the upcoming cross-gen releases like Horizon and God of War?" We can table that Horizon God of War part for a minute, but talking about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart as a PS5 exclusive game that is not coming out on any other console, including the PS4. For you guys, what did that do for gameplay? And do you think it lived up to that? Tim, I want to start with you.
I really don't, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing is I think that what this game does extremely well, it's a technical behemoth, and it is insane, and it is just as close to flawless as a game like this can be from a tech perspective. It runs fantastic. The ray tracing is insane. The art style, 10 out of 10, all of that. So at the end of the day, the game just works. So you don't really notice when things, you don't call things out unless they don't work. You know what I mean? So for this to just be flawless like it is, it's like, okay, cool. That's not as exciting as, oh man, well, it did all these cool things that are flashy and fun and crazy. It was just, oh, this was a really fantastic experience. And I think that I would be very interested to see this game if it was cross-gen, if it was a PS4, because besides the kind of boring technical stuff, I don't know what about this game couldn't have been on a PlayStation 4. And I say that having just played Resident Evil Village and knowing that we're about to play Horizon and God of War eventually, and Miles Morales even, right? Like definitely playing Miles Morales on a PlayStation 4 and then on a PlayStation 5 or Spider-Man even. It's like you do see the difference in things like loading times, which are non-existent in Ratchet and Clank. So it's like those are the things that I'm like, yes, this thing is flexing the PS5 for sure. And it is extremely impressive. But how different and how much worse would the experience have been on the PS4? That's the type of thing I can't wait to watch a really in-depth YouTube video about. But from a gameplay perspective, there was really nothing.
I'm pretty much aligned with you in the way that you mentioned loading times being a big benefit to how that works for Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. And loading times also a big benefit for Spider-Man Miles Morales, a game that was also cross-gen, right? For me, like the Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, I think there are things that probably technically wouldn't work on the PlayStation 4, like the rift situations and going back and forth between levels. That stuff would probably be more intensive on a PS4, especially because it seems to be taking advantage of an SSD. But aside from that, like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart as a cross-gen game, I think probably would have worked just as well. You know, like aside from like having to redo some of the Rift stuff, none of the gameplay stuff necessarily spoke to me as this is only possible on this current console, right? I think the way the game looks is only possible on this current console. I think the way ray tracing works obviously is only possible here. I think how good the details are, the particle effects, how good the textures are. Visually, the game shines, but you know, those are things I would say also about games like Miles Morales or games that like Resident Evil 8 that we're coming off of. Neither of those games as good looking as Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, but games that are extremely good looking on next gen as well. And so yeah, like I don't feel like it is the end all be all. Feels like such a big statement. I don't feel like it is the big seller for me in terms of this game wouldn't work on PS4. I think technically the game probably wouldn't work on PS4, but I don't think it's necessarily sold the gameplay difference promise. Does that make sense?
With that, Bless, like talking about the rifts being the difference, it's like I'd be really interested to see what rifts, like what actual moments in this game, having beat the game, knowing all the moments that happen, what are the moments that are only possible on PS5, and what would they look like on a different piece of hardware in terms of like how they're loaded or how they're disguised, like the changes between the rifts between environments, because we've seen environment changes in games for a very long time. And even like dating back to like Dead or Alive, fighting each other, getting knocked off a built like through a wall, and like the level changes, whatever. And like obviously that's hidden with kind of movie moments or video moments. But I mean, at the end of the day, this game, you're literally on rails. A lot of it as cool things are happening around you, and most of the rift parts are when you're not in control.
Yes, they're out there when you're not in control, or they're things that are built into the level. Like I think of the pocket dimensions. Like you go to those and you go into like a very small level, but that is something that I feel like we've seen before. Like when we're playing Mario Odyssey, for example, we hop into quote unquote pocket dimensions all the time in that game. That I think that is a good question. I'm sure like I think when you ask that question, the thing that pops in my mind are like, I guess the on-rail sequences when you are jumping back and forth. I'm sure development-wise, that is way easier to do on a PS5 than on a PS4. But it also does strike me as something that's not impossible to do on a PS4, given that we've seen things like Titanfall 2's level, Cause and Effect, or even Dishonored's level, Cracking the Slab. Like those levels did very similar things in terms of hopping back between timelines and seeing different versions of levels and all that stuff. Steve, I want to get you involved. Like, how do you feel? Do you feel like this is a game that speaks to the PS5's level to make the PS5's ability to make games that work specifically for the PS5?
I agree with you both to a certain degree in regards to the gameplay mechanics. Like gameplay wise, you don't really see a huge amount of what the PS5 can do that, say, another console could probably do. I think though the technical side of it is really what you can only do on the PS5. As you had mentioned, there's definitely some moments where, without really spoiling, essentially that you're switching essentially completely different environments in literally less than a second. There's a clip that actually Insomniac had just put out where they showed off the performance, 60 frames per second RT mode, where essentially you're on rails and you're hitting a pink/purple crystal, and then those screen flashes for a second, and then the entire level completely changes around you. And that's like not like trying to be able to like render in all of the elements around you as you're spreading out from your character. That's the entire level completely changes all the way around you, and it's done in less than a second. Yeah, it's on rails, and there's probably some sort of like technical shortcuts that it can be done. For coming from the development sort of side to a degree, because of just the consulting that I've done with some studios and kind of knowing at least a little bit of that. That is something that on current hardware, like a PS4 would struggle with that. It would stutter in those kind of moments. And instead of taking a second, it would probably take a few seconds where the screen just flashes white and then it just waits for it to be able to render in. And then you'll notice as the like other things in the background that essentially are going to finally be able to pop in because of just when it's still loading in the level. I think that like that in and of itself is what like shows the true PS5 is those Rift aspects. I think it's sort of, I think it's still early on in the generation that it's kind of a sort of a basic way of being able to showcase like the PS5. I think going back to what you were kind of saying earlier, Tim, was that I would sort of some new elements with Rifts that I would love to have been able to see that I think the PS5 could technically probably do. And I had kind of a sort of a brain like fart, sort of like, oh, this would be really cool. Would be, what if at one point or any given point in the game, you basically be like, okay, tag, Rivet, you're it. A rift opens up, Rivet jumps in, Ratchet jumps out, and you're now playing like it's within like you're now, and there's a sort of different sort of gameplay that happens, and you have to be able to switch between the two. I think being able to do that on the fly and dynamically using the rifts and stuff like that would be a really cool sort of like, I love to see what they can be able to do. So if Insomniac decides to make a Rift a Part 2, I think that could be kind of a cool thing that could happen. But I think, yeah, technically this is where the PS5 shines more than the previous generation. I think, but yeah, I agree with you that gameplay wise, there's not a huge amount there that really like showcases it other than it looks really, really good.
Yeah. And to take the example you just gave, right? Like I think I would have wanted to see, which might still technically be impossible, would be to be able to switch between dimensions at will. Because you can rift to the rift points you see in the map, especially when you're in combat scenarios. You can use that to take you to the other side of the map real quickly, and things like that. And there was in one of the previews, I think it was a Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart State of Play, there was this scene where in the middle of a boss battle, they took you to a different area, which felt very like, oh, this is what the PS5 can do sort of thing. But it still was on rails. I would love that in a boss battle, you could willingly, like, maybe you're fighting two bosses at the same time and you're going back and forth between dimensions at will to chip down both their health at the same time or something along those lines.
Well, that'd be dope.
Like that's the type of shit that I want to see. Like that's the type of shit that I think would reflect well in the way of, oh, now this is what next gen can do. But I think for me the rifts often felt like they were a way to be like, hey, technically this is only possible on the PS5, even though they don't. They're not the best thing about the game. You know, I think that's the thing for me. But I do want to continue that conversation. We're going to continue that conversation though in PlayStation updates, where we do talk about God of War getting delayed and also being on the PS4. So stay tuned for that. For now, I want to bring in a question from Madeline, aka Matt Exposure, who wrote into patreon.com/kindafunnygames is like, you can, and says, "Hey friends, hope you're all having a great Tuesday. This question is for Steve. What are the top 3 or top 5 accessibility features you see in Ratchet and Clank that you think should be in all games? Is there a feature you think that is still missing or could be improved upon?"
That's a very good question, Madeline. So thanks so much for asking that. I would say, so in order to be able to kind of answer that, and I've kind of, unfortunately, I think even in our Returnal episode, I've kind of said this in the past. There's definitely, like, I would love to be able to see sort of a standard set of options in for accessibility in games. However, there are moments where essentially options don't really do the trick. If you have a game that doesn't you sort of communicate via sort of dialogue, then there really is no point to be able to have subtitle options in these kind of games. So I think it really depends on kind of the game that is being made. That being said, I think the true aspect of accessibility should be from design. Accessibility has to be part of the design process, because otherwise you're just going to have to build, you're just adding on options on top of options on top of options to try to be able to fix that aspect that you just couldn't be able to do because you didn't have that as part of the design. And I think in a way Ratchet kind of does that, because there are aspects in this game that I literally could not play or complete the game without them. And there are other options in games that I've played and use all the time, but to me they were always like kind of like quality of life, comfort sort of thing, so that I can be able to sit back and relax and my disability not getting in the way. In this, I had to use game speed all the time. I had to use auto aim and auto lock all the time. I had to use high contrast mode all the time because I could not be able to complete those sections without them. That's the first time I've really kind of like had that specific, like, okay, it's required for me to be able to use those options. That being said, again, it's still very accessible. Still 100% would recommend it. I think probably the options that I loved, that I would love to be able to see in different games and in specific in specific genres that would need them, I would say game speed is to me was like, I was mind blown when I started to play with that. And if games are able to offer that, would make combat situations a lot more easier for me to be able to play and to be able to do high contrast mode that they were able to pull in from Miles and then into here. And then it looks like some sort of inspiration from the high contrast mode from The Last of Us 2 was a really nice touch, being able to like fully customize that. Because in The Last of Us, you had it where you can sort of set the different colors for your whether Ellie or enemies or items you can be able to interact with. In this, you can customize and swap out colors as you need them. So if you need the enemies to be purple, you can do that and have the boxes be red or green. And you can even also turn off some of the elements. You can turn off the high contrast mode on your character, and you can even turn off the background, like sort of black and like sort of turns the background to black and white. You can be able to turn that off as well and just have certain items be highlighted. So I love that sort of customization. I'd love to be able to kind of see more of that in different games. And as far as others that I use, again, auto aim, switching to auto targets was so great, because again, when you're in combat situations, you have to move around. You cannot stop. This is not you hide behind cover and be able to just pick people off one by one. You have to keep moving, very much kind of like Doom Eternal. You have to keep moving, otherwise you're going to die very quickly. So being able to have the auto aim and target lock, where it would essentially, once you kill an enemy, it will automatically switch the aim to another enemy that's nearby. That to me was great because then in combat situations, I can literally just spam the trigger button and I can just hop around and dodge out of the enemy missiles. And that's the thing I can be able to focus on the most. And then being able to strategize what weapons I would be able to need for this particular situation. And it allowed me to like be able to play this without as much stress. So it's stuff like that I think are great. Love to be able to see more in other games of this genre. Like I said, to reiterate, I think I could sort of see that it's possible that Ratchet wasn't accessible by design because of just the amount of options that I had to use to be able to play it. But I think it still does not knock the fact that this game is still very accessible to be able to play. It just sort of like misses in certain key points.
I want to bring this right in from Lucid Dream, who writes in and say, just wanted to mention that several members of Insomniac tweeted out that they did not experience any crunch while working on Rift Apart. And I think that's laudable and should be celebrated around the industry. What an outstanding accomplishment. And yeah, that's one I wanted to shout out to you because I've seen those tweets as well. And we talk a lot about Insomniac games and how good they are as a developer at putting out games. But I think when you talk about great developers, being able to have your employees feel proud enough to say that they didn't crunch on your game, I think adds a lot to that. I think that is especially coming off of putting out 2 games in the span of like 7 or 8 months.
Technically, if you think about it, 3 games, because you had the remastered version of Spider-Man 2.
You're
so
right.
Technically 3 games.
You're absolutely right.
Huge games in the past 6 months. Like that is insane. And the fact that they didn't have any crunch at all, that's awesome.
It's awesome. Yep. It's impressive. Shout out to that. That's Absolutely. Really cool. I want to bring in a question from Joshy G, who wrote in to say, is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart a must-buy game?
Yes.
It's a system seller.
I would say it's a must-buy for people who have a PS5 and are looking for a big PS5 game. I think easily it's a must-buy for that. If you're a Ratchet and Clank game, or if you're a Ratchet and Clank fan, 1000% like get Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. It is probably the best, or one of the best entries it is a top tier Ratchet and Clank game, like period. And so for sure, like for that. And then if you like platformers or third person shooters in general, it's a must buy. The only caveat I'll give is if you don't like Ratchet and Clank, if that is not your jam, I don't think this is going to be the one that changes your mind. But it is what, if you play 2016 and maybe you are looking for some more quality of life stuff, or you're looking for a smoother experience, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is that. But if you really didn't like 2016 for whatever
better
reason,
than 2016.
Then, yeah,
it is.
Yeah,
I think it's an entirely different league than 2016, and I enjoyed 2016 a lot. But this has nothing but improvements over 2016. I think in every way. I think that just from a graphical and technical standpoint, this game, and not even just that, like just the sound effects, like the entire kind of just technical side of this makes it a must play, a must buy game. I think that language gets a little iffy just because, like, especially this is a $70 game. Like that is a lot of money, and we just kind of have transitioned over to that. And personally, I'm in a place where I can afford that and I can support that, and I do think there's $70 here. Like I've said a couple times now, have 100% of this game, played it multiple times. Even with that, I think total gameplay, I'm at like 22 hours, something like that, which is not much, quote unquote, for $70 and for what we expect from video games. But what goes into this video game, like, it is fairly content light, but the content is very high quality and fun. And I do think there's $70 worth of fun in this. And I think that the game is presented in a way that it does feel like it is part of the PlayStation canon, and it is part of these experiences that is worth playing through. And it's not too long that it's going to lose you, even if you're not necessarily absolutely in love with it. And at the end of the day, it's a third-person shooter. Like, it's fun to shoot things. That video games rely on that, so it does that well.
Yeah, it's definitely a high-budget ass game. If that's what you're looking for. If that is what justifies your $70 to you. Sorry, Steve,
I was thinking about this in the shower. Actually, this is a AAA ass A game. And like that is a good thing, not a bad thing. This is an A type of game, a platformer, a 3D mascot platformer with guns. Like where that's at, it's like, I can't believe we're getting this from PlayStation Studios with the amount of love and production value put in, because it makes it a AAA experience that, again, is retailing for $70. And that's not like oof, that's crazy. It's like there's a reason, and we will need to support this if we want more of these type of things, and if we want the AAA space to be something that's not just super highly polished narrative driven third person behind the shoulder games or crazy ass multiplayer suites, right? Like I like that there are other genres kind of being played with here.
Yeah, and I think actually going to what you were saying earlier, Blessing, about like if you don't play these kind of games or this particular genre, that this may not be the one for you. Actually, I kind of will say it can be, because for me, I can't play a lot of platformers, and I don't really have a huge amount of interest in them. I'm sorry, I know Tim Crash is your boy, but I just can't get into them as much as I would want to. I've tried, and it's not. Part of it is because I can't play them. Part of it is just I just don't really have a huge amount of interest. But with this one, I was pleasantly surprised at actually how much I did enjoy it. Part of it is because the accessibility does help for me to be able to see what you all see in these games. And I think that's a huge thing. And it makes me kind of want to sort of seek out this genre a little bit more. And hopefully as these games progress in the new generation, I hope that more of these accessibility options will move over, because I would love to be able to play like a new fully next gen Crash game for the first time and be able to have these kind of options that are in there. So for me, I think this is definitely something that would be worth the money, even from a disability standpoint, because again, being able to buy a game and finding out you can only be able to after about 2 hours of playing, you can't play it, is a huge financial burden for a lot of disabled players. I think that this is definitely worth it in that particular sense. If you feel like if you're looking at the options, because they do have it up on the PlayStation blog where they have all the options that are listed there, and I'm sure they're probably going to put up more once the game kind of releases essentially what is listed. But I think unless there's something there that like, you know what, I can't play it because of this, then I would say wait until it'll eventually kind of go on sale. But to me, I think this is definitely for me a must play and at a certain point a must buy game.
Yeah. But up something he said real quick about mentioning the Crash Bandicoot thing. I was thinking about this as I was playing Rift Apart. If you enjoy Rift Apart, I highly recommend you play Crash Bandicoot 4 afterwards. It's a slightly different type of game. It's 2D more than just purely 3D. But from a gameplay standpoint, from a story standpoint, from a playing with different time zones or dimension, whatever, it's all the same shit at the end of the day. They're both, I would say, equally quality experiences. And Crash is definitely on the way more challenging side and the way more grueling side of things. But I think that they are both very, very high quality games, and they kind of show what a $50 version looks like compared to a $70 version. And I think that in terms of production value and stuff, that stuff makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, Tim, you convinced me. I'll try out Crash 4.
One more thing I'll mention in this conversation too is in my tweet out this morning of the review, one of the things I mentioned was that, I think the game is somewhat content light. I think it has it has a good amount of content, but I think for me going in, I was expecting a little bit more. And then also I think the game can get repetitive in some instances. I'm not one to necessarily speak to what $70 means to you, because $70 means something different to every single person listening, and so I don't want to speak to that. But the only thing we can do as people talking about video games or reviewing video games is give you as much context as possible for where you're getting into. And so for where you're getting into, it is a high ass budget game. It's a very good game. It is an excellent game. It's a great PlayStation exclusive. For me, in my taste, gets a little bit repetitive, but that is going to mean something different to everybody else. And what I closed the Gamescast with, my statement was that I think if you're a Ratchet and Clank fan, or if you're just looking for a game like this, you're going to be very satisfied with what you get. It's a very good game. I want to bring in one more question from Keegan Hill, who wrote into patreon.com/kindoffunnygames, just like you can, and says, "Hey, Bless and Tim, just finished watching your guys' review for Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames. Do you think Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart could be Game of the Year? And even if Horizon Forbidden West does come out this year, do you think Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart could beat Horizon Forbidden West?"
I don't even want to bring the Horizon thing into it. I think even without that, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is not Game of the Year. In my opinion.
I agree. I will still say that I'd have Returnal higher on my Game of the Year rankings, and maybe even It Takes Two would probably be in contention for it as well. But overall, Ratchet and Clank, I think is going to be a lot of people's Game of the Year. I think it's going to be in a lot of people's top 10 and top 5 for game of the year. It's not necessarily my personal definitive game of the year.
Do you think it like makes nominations when we get to the end of the year?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's going to be in my top 5. I'm sure, but I'd say even already, I prefer Resident Evil Village.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, from my perspective, I mean, being able to roll credits on a game is very rare for me, and it usually has to sort of hit in a specific level where it's just like it's fun to play and it's accessible for me to be able to play that I can be able to complete. In that sense, it is definitely in the running for my game of the year, and so far, kind of is just based on the games that I've played so far this year. I would even say it definitely is in the running for accessible game of the year, minus any games that come out for the rest of the year. I mean, we're already halfway through. I think I might know of one possibly, and that might be Far Cry 6. Just the amount of accessibility that is in that might be definitely in contention. But for me right now, I would say for all the accessibility categories. So if you say the Game Awards this year, the accessible category, Ratchet and Clank is definitely in the running to being accessible game of the year for sure.
Yeah, and I think especially when you look at then recording this post E3 or pre E3, I should say, and I know there are going to be a handful of people that are probably listening to this after they got into billion announcements that are going to lay out what the rest of the year looks like. For now, what the year looks like. The year looks like Ratchet and Clank is going to be in the top 5 of plenty of people's game of the year lists. Like, I think yeah, deservedly so, because it's an incredible game, right? I think like the only competition that's up there right now in the year is probably going to be things like Deathloop maybe, and then I can't even think of what the bigger there's not really a big slate of big releases. Maybe Halo Infinite, if that ends up hitting, I'm sure that'll be in plenty of people's lists. But yeah, like I think for what this year is right now, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is one of the best releases. It's definitely up there. And a lot of people are going to have this in their list.
What's interesting for me, and I want to make this clear, like what I was saying, Resident Evil, that's a personal thing for me. On my list, Village would be above Ratchet and Clank by just a little bit. But I even then don't think Resident Evil Village is like game of the year contender. I think that so far we haven't had that yet this year, and I think that we might. And I think that this is an extremely quality game. But like when we play a game in June, and we can definitively say like, oh my God, like this is game of the year in the same way we did with God of War in April when it came out, and we're like, it's this game's to lose, right? It's very unlikely we're going to get something of that quality. This isn't quite that, and that's totally fucking fine, because like I would say that this is it's very damn good.
Yeah, it's a very damn good game, and it's also the best reviewing game of the year so far. If you look at Metacritic, it's killing it.
Which I'm surprised by, honestly. I'm surprised
also a little bit surprised
how high the reviews are. Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
I think even OpenCritic says it's the most or the highest reviewed game of 2021.
Wow.
Yeah, I just like it's really damn polished. It's really damn good, but it's like it's getting a lot more like 9.5 plus than I think it really hits.
Because has it increased from 89 this morning overall? Because
I assume it's still sitting at 89.
Yeah, that high 80 low 90 was kind of what I was suspecting from it.
Yeah, I think I was expecting a lot of 9s. I don't think I was expecting 9s across the board. I thought I was going to see a few more like 8s and it to be spread out a little bit more. But I think that mainly speaks to how technically impressive it is, though. Like it is for real, like one of the most beautiful looking games I've ever seen, and like technically impressive games I've ever seen. So I think that has
as of right now
as well.
As of right now, Metacritic is 88 and OpenCritic is 89.
Mm-hmm. Steve, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of PS Love You XOXO. Before we get into the ads and get into the rest of the show, where can people find your work?
You can be able to find me on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/snowball. I have a very long half-hour accessibility review along with my friends Courtney Craven from Can I Play That, as well as Stacey Jenkins. We talk about the cognitive accessibility, deaf and hard of hearing accessibility, and obviously the blind and low vision accessibility. There's a really great conversation about that. If you want to know more about that, check it out, youtube.com/snowball, or you can follow me on Twitter @SteveSaylor, or on Twitch, twitch.tv/blindgamersteve.
Hell yeah. Also, as a writer, Steve was also on Beyond, so go check out that episode. Steve, again, you're wonderful. Thank you so much for lending your talents to us so that we have a little bit more informed view on a lot of what this stuff looks like, especially for accessibility. You're very good at what you do.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. It was really a pleasure, and I love talking this stuff with you all, so this is great. Thank you.
Remember, you can go to patreon.com/kindoffunnygames where you can get the show ad-free, but you didn't, so here's some ads.
This episode is brought to you by Candid. If you're unhappy with your smile, you don't have to be. Thousands of people have used Candid, the clear, comfortable, and removable, practically invisible aligners to help straighten their teeth, and now they love their smile. Just like Sharon H. from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania does. She says, I wore braces as a teenager. Flash forward 30 years, I had crowding on the bottom and one of my teeth actually stuck out. That's when I made the decision to move forward with Candid, and I finally got my confidence back. You could be just like Sharon. Your treatment is prescribed and closely monitored remotely by a licensed orthodontist who's an expert in tooth movement. You'll have the same quality of care you'd get from an in-office orthodontist from the comfort and convenience of your own home, and we all love that nowadays. And while other companies use general dentists, Candid only works with orthodontist. With Candid, the same orthodontist who created your plan is with you from start to finish, so you never have to wonder how you're doing. The average Candid treatment's just 6 months. You'll start seeing results way before then, and it costs thousands less than traditional braces. One of my really good friends, Danny, has used this and loves it in his teeth, looking fantastic. You can become your best you. Start straightening your teeth today. Right now, you can save $75 on Candid starter kit. Go to candidco.com/kindafunny and use code kindafunny. That's candidco.com/kindafunny, code kindafunny. Take advantage of this limited time offer to save $75 on your starter kit. candidco.com/kindafunny, code kindafunny. Next up, shout out to Purple Mattresses. As the world becomes increasingly uncomfortable, we're all looking for as much comfort as we can get, and that's why I love my Purple pillow. Joey loves her Purple mattress. We're talking soft, we're talking comfort, and my favorite thing about it all is we're talking about a pillow that never gets hot. You never need to flip it to the cold side of the pillow because both sides are always just perfect for me. I love it, been using it for years, and I will never turn back. Purple is comfort reinvented. Only Purple has the Grid, a stretchy gel material that's amazingly supportive for your back and legs while cushioning your shoulders, neck, and hips. I don't know how it works. It does, and it's awesome. Because of how it's designed, the Grid doesn't trap air. Air actually circulates and flows through it, so you never overheat, and I tend to overheat, so this is great for me. Right now, you can try your Purple mattress risk-free with free shipping and returns. Financing is available too. Purple really is comfort for an uncomfortable world. Right now, you'll get 10% off any order of 200 or more. Go to purple.com/games10 and use promo code GAMES10. That's purple.com/games10, promo code GAMES10 for 10% off any order of 200 or more. Purple.com/games10, promo code GAMES10. Terms apply. And finally, I want to give a shout out to Upstart. When it comes to paying off debt, it can often feel like an uphill battle. High interest rates resulting in minimum monthly payments keeps you in an endless cycle of debt. Upstart can help you get ahead. Are you carrying a credit card balance month after month? You're not the only one. High interest rates make it hard to pay off your debt, but Upstart can help. Join the thousands of happy borrowers who made that final payment, just like my friend James, who's now in a much better situation than he was before. He used to have a debt in a lot of places, was able to consolidate in one place thanks to Upstart, and now he's fully paid off. Whether it's paying off credit cards, consolidating high interest debt, or funding personal expenses, over 500,000 people have used Upstart to get a simple fixed monthly payment. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/kindafunny. That's upstart.com/kindafunny. Don't forget to use this URL to let them know that we sent you. Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and other certain information provided in your loan application. Upstart.com/kindafunny.
Now it's time for some PlayStation updates. We have a good greatest hits of PlayStation news over the last few weeks because last week was our Disco Elysium spoiler cast. Didn't have any time to talk about what went down. This week I was gonna hold it off for this week, but too much happened, and we got to talk about things that happened, Tim. And we got to talk about the biggest thing that happened, being God of War has been delayed. God of War Ragnarok is delayed until 2022, and it is also coming out on the PS4. I'm going to pull from Adam Bankhurst at IGN to catch us up. Sony has announced that the sequel to 2018's God of War has been delayed to 2022 and that the much anticipated game will be released on both PS5 and PS4. Head of PlayStation Studios Herman Holst announced the news on PlayStation Blog in a Q&A where he discussed what's next for PlayStation Studios. While he shared that Horizon Forbidden West is still on track to release this holiday season, God of War started a little later, so the decision was made to push the game to 2022 to ensure it is, quote, the amazing God of War game that we all want to play, end quote. Holst continued by explaining how important it is that Sony did not abandon the more than 110 million PS4 players, but he promised that it was still very important to have showpieces for the PS5. Quote, "You can't build a community of over 110 million PS4 owners and then just walk away from it, right? I think that'd be bad news for fans of the PS4 and frankly, not very good business," Holst said. Where it makes sense to develop a title for both PS4 and PS5 for Horizon Forbidden West, the next God of War, GT 7, Gran Turismo 7. We'll continue looking at that. And if PS4 owners want to play that game, then they can. If they want to go on and play the PS5 version, that game will be there for them. Quote, "That being said, it's also very important to have showpieces for PS5, hence the development of Returnal and Ratchet that are exclusive to the PS5. Tim, this news broke last week. The internet broke off of the news breaking. I don't think I've heard your thoughts on this. Where are you at with this news?
I mean, look, there's a lot of complicated issues that go into this just with where everything's at right now and just the realities of business and the realities of game development and so many other realities. And I think that it's not that big of a surprise. Like, there's just simple math to be had where money's good. Money allows better games to be made, bigger games to be made, people to keep making games, et cetera, et cetera. The facts of the matter are, there aren't as many PS5s in the wild as Sony or consumers would like, and there won't be for a very long time. That is unfortunate in every single way, right? That's bad for the gaming industry, period. I think that looking out these games and them coming out on PS4 and PS5, I think that it's undeniable that there are things that will not be as good as they could have been if it was just purely designed for PS5. But we just spent 30 minutes earlier in this episode talking about how Ratchet and Clank, like, yeah, the DualSense is fantastic. The 3D audio is fantastic. The technical sides of the loading and the graphics and all that stuff, yes, that stuff is only possible on PS5, and it is totally worth having on PS5, and I'm happy that I played that game on PS5. But looking at this list of games, it's like I'm kind of missing a little bit of consistency in, so what's a showpiece for PS5 and what's it makes sense to develop for both PS4 and PS5? Like Returnal and Ratchet versus God of War. You'd think God of War would be your showpiece you want. And personally, I would have preferred that. I would prefer that take your time with this game. Like 2022, even that being delayed is still way earlier than I expected a God of War sequel. And to that point, even with 2022, I wonder how big that game is going to be. And I'm excited for it. I know they're going to knock it out of the park. I have nothing but faith in them. I think their transparency and the way they've talked about this delay was handled 10 out of 10. But personally, as a PS5 owner, as somebody that wants to see games and PlayStation in specific advance, I am a little bummed. I would rather God of War be one of these showpiece titles for PS5 that is purely developed for it. And whether or not we see the difference from a gameplay side, like we didn't really with Ratchet, I would prefer that. But at the end of the day, this doesn't really bother me. I'm not concerned. God of War on PS4 was ridiculously fantastic and honestly is just as technically impressive as Ratchet is when you're actually playing them. So with all that said, I think we've just hit a point, especially with, to me, it's more important that it's a PlayStation exclusive, that is made by PlayStation Studios, and that there is some type of level of quality control of what that means for their products and where the products are going to play. So no matter what you're playing it on, except for maybe the base PS4, but with what Sony's talking about of what they're pushing, they're going to be pushing the PS4 Pro, they're going to be pushing the PlayStation 5 with this thing, with these games. And they have proven that these games run incredibly well on PlayStation 4 and only run better on PlayStation 5. So yeah, cool.
I think you hit it perfectly. I'm going to bring in two questions from two Tylers who wrote in. Tyler A.C. Chris and also Tyler Ross, who we talked about earlier. I'm going to bring in his question that he wrote. Starting with Tyler A.C. Chris, Tyler wrote in to say, do you think the backlash to the God of War sequel coming to PS4 and PS5 is warranted or blown out of proportion? Do you think that the game is going to be held back by the PS4, or do you think it's coming to PS4 because the game's design did not warrant the need to be next-gen exclusive like Ratchet and Clank? Off of that, Tyler Ross, as a reminder, Tyler Ross wrote in to ask, how has the development of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, a AAA PS5 exclusive, impacted your views on the upcoming cross-gen releases like Horizon and God of War? And Tim, like coming off of what you said, right? And coming off of playing Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, I think the place where I've come down with all of this is that there is way more to being a PS5 game or being a game that takes advantage of the power of PS5 than the way we think about exclusive PS5 features. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, the rifts were cool, but the thing that I love more about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is how that game shines and how that game looks and how fluid it is and all this stuff, right? A lot of the stuff that we see similarly out of a game like Spider-Man Miles Morales. Spider-Man Miles Morales, just because it was a cross-gen game, that doesn't mean that Spider-Man Miles Morales for the PS5 didn't take advantage of the PS5. Exactly. The game looked better on PS5. Exactly. That game ran better on PS5. That game took advantage of the SSD when you look at the load times. It was a fantastic game on PS5 despite coming out on PS4. I think God of War 2018, for what that game is still a masterpiece. Like, that is a 10 out of 10 game to me. I love God of War 2018, and that is a game that so many people love. A sequel to that game coming out on PS4 and PS5 could still be a masterpiece, right? Like, creatively, who knows who lives up to the first one? You know, that's a whole different conversation. But as far as the potential for God of War Ragnarok, it coming out on PS4 and PS5 doesn't really affect me as much. I guess that means it's not going to have like portal rifts in the way that Ratchet and Clank does, but I don't need that out of a God of War Ragnarok. I think it can still have features that take advantage of next gen, even if it is on the previous gen system. It can still run in performance mode. It can still look incredible. It can still have ray tracing. There's way more to being a next gen games or a next gen game than I think the gameplay design things that we think of, you know. And even when we get to those big things, right? That was a big thing I talked about last year. Is I can't wait to see when games do take advantage of how level design can change based off the SSD, or how open world games can or linear games can toe the line between being open and linear and being quality and all this stuff. That's stuff that I'm looking forward to in maybe 5 years. You know, I was talking to, I think it was Gary Whitta who I was talking to in KFGD, where he was like, yeah, the best games for the PS4, the games that took advantage of the PS4 the most didn't come out until later on. You know, Last of Us Part 2, way more impressive game than something like Killzone Shadowfall, or even way more impressive game than more impressive game than Uncharted 4, I'd say. You know, like, it takes time to really, like, I think, live up to that potential of being something that is going to be a truly fantastic exclusive PS5 game.
But the thing there is, like, that's only true because they aren't committing to it early. If they committed to it earlier, then we'd get there earlier than 5 years into the generation. And it's fine, because at the end of the day, we've hit a point of quality of games that is just ridiculous. The amount of times I'm playing any video game, third party, first party, doesn't matter. And I have to pause to just be like, I can't believe this is real and that I'm playing this right now. It is just so, like, we've talked about the Pixar quality stuff of animation. And so it's like, with the fact that there are so many games we say that about now is just utterly outrageous, and I love it. But I do think that a lot of what you're saying about, like, Miles Morales, it's like, yeah, but what if they went into it with the idea of, we're gonna do stuff that is going to enhance gameplay that can only be done here? And that's where I'm a little let down by Ratchet. And I keep saying, it's just like, from a technical standpoint, yeah, it's doing a lot of stuff, but from a gameplay standpoint, it straight up didn't. And I would have been much more interested in them taking the gameplay side of things, of like, what can enhance the experience of playing this game more, and that is unique to this next gen opportunity. And until developers are thinking that way, if they ever even do, it's not really going to be held back, because they're still making PS4 games. And a PS4 game is God of War or Spider-Man. Yeah. So that is not a knock at all. They got that shit down to a science. Look at Last of Us 2. Are you freaking kidding me? But it's like, we always talk about, I think it's such a tired conversation to talk about load times being hidden with the walking through crawl spaces and all of this. Until games, even when they don't need those, stop using those, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because the games are still being designed that way, because that's how people are comfortable designing things. And that's just how shit works. There's a language you need to learn to be able to keep going. And the sooner we start trying to speak that language, the sooner we're going to be speaking French. The sooner we're going to be making Last of Us 2's, God of War's on PS4, but on the PS5 version. Whatever a new IP looks like, whatever this, holy crap, I can't believe this is possible, 10 out of 10. Like, that is still possible if with that game coming out on PS4 as well. And guess what? That's millions more dollars, tens of millions, hundreds of millions more dollars being made for the same game, for the same development team. Adds more development, adds more time, adds all that stuff. But clearly that's worth it to Sony and the 110 million units out there. But guess what? They didn't put out PS4 games on PS3. That happened for like 2 months, and it was the third-party games, Assassin's Creed and blah, blah, blah. And in some cases, like Metal Gear Solid 5, it was insanely impressive that the game ran as well as it did on the previous gen and the next gen. But it was like, holy crap, this game is a showstopper either way. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at now. But knowing that we got years of this left, it's different. Not necessarily worse, but it's different.
Yeah, I feel what you're saying. I think I'm less bothered by it, mainly for the fact that like we keep bringing up the point that that like PS4 had God of War and all this stuff, right? And I think also for the fact that I think there is a glamorization of next gen that I think needs to be toned down just a little bit in terms of what you can expect out of games for next gen. Because we talk about talking about, I think Ratchet and Clank is the pure example for me, where again, like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, the main thing that makes that game a next gen game is the rifts. And the rifts, again, like cool, not life changing by any means. Like I wouldn't want a God of War 2022 to in the way that Herman Hulst was talking about showpieces in the piece, right? I don't want a God of War 22 or even a Horizon Forbidden West to be a game that feels like it is, all right, this is a PS5 game because it's showing off a specific thing that the PS5 can do, and that ends up feeling gimmicky, you know? And I don't think PlayStation would treat God of War or Horizon Forbidden West that way, but you never know. You know, we could get into that place where Horizon Forbidden West has the random feature where you I don't know, man, go back in time randomly to where you're a child, and that's like that's transitioned to really quickly because of the power of the SSD. Like, I don't need that bullshit. I don't need that like gimmick to be shoveled in there, because Horizon Forbidden West, all I want from that game is it to be a good, solid game, regardless of the hardware. Like, when I think of some of my favorite games of all time, I'm not thinking of games that necessarily take advantage of certain hardware. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was a game that was on the Nintendo Switch, which isn't the most technically impressive hardware outside of it being what it is and being handheld. You know, like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild worked on hardware that was not technically competitive with what PlayStation and Xbox and PC is doing, but it was still a magnificent game, one of the best games ever played. And I think dope game design is going to be dope game design regardless of what hardware you're making a game on. And I think that's the thing that strikes me more of like, yeah, I don't really like when this news came out. I think that was the point that hit me, where I was like, yeah, I don't really care. Like, I'll play this game regardless, because hopefully it's going to be a dope game because it's coming from dope people.
Yeah, when it comes to like the whole next gen thing, the glamorification of it, like what you were saying, Bless, it's like, for me, it's not like thinking of devs thinking about like what needs to be best utilized for the PS5 and next gen gameplay type of stuff. It's just like, for me, next gen is having more stabilized hardware and stuff, and not having my my PlayStation run like a motherfucker while running God of War, and still getting like framey while playing God of War and stuff like that. Like, I'm not expecting this whole like revelation in the next era of gameplay. It's more just like having it be more stable and having games be a little prettier and shit like that, and not have it overtax things. I think that's what next gen is for me right now, and what I expect out of the next generation of games. So yeah, I'm kind of the same with you, where it's like the fact that God of War Ragnarok or 2 or whatever the fuck it's called is also coming to PS4, I don't think is going to be a hindrance in what they want to, the story that they want to tell and the gameplay that they want to create.
Yeah, and I think gameplay innovation is also like a very gradual thing that is going to happen regardless. Actually, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say it was going to happen regardless of hardware. I'm sure there are ways that eventually, when we get 6 years from now or 5 years from now, whenever Naughty Dog puts out an exclusive PlayStation 5 game, I'm sure they'll take advantage of the hardware in ways that are cool. But you know, I think that's still going to be a gradual learning thing as they understand what they can do with the hardware and get creative with it, and get even Insomniac, right? I think they're going to find ways to take advantage of it that are cooler than even the riffs are in Ratchet and Clank, because I think this for them is probably a cool, let's figure out what works, let's figure out how to use this, let's figure out how to display it in a way that is very visible to the audience, because PlayStation wants us to make a game that's going to sell people on what a PS5 is. And as they get used to making games on this hardware, we're going to see more and more clever uses of it. That's my hope, at least. Fingers crossed. Let's talk about PlayStation Studios' new IP from Days Gone, because we also got that out of the same interview, or the Q&A with Herman Hulst. This is part of the same article I was reading before, again from IGN. Adam Bankhurst. Hulst also discussed how important new IP is for PlayStation Studios, which account for half of the 25 titles currently in development at PlayStation Studios. Quote, "New IP is incredibly important to us," Hulst said. "New IP is the lifeblood of gaming, but new IP is just one aspect of our strategy. Ultimately, I want PlayStation Studios to be fiercely daring, to take risks. I want us to continue to embrace the legacy of PlayStation, pushing the boundaries of gaming, keep making games that matter. games that probably wouldn't have made it anywhere else, or wouldn't have been made anywhere else. Quote, and Ben Studio is working on a very exciting new IP that they're very, very passionate about. They're building on the deep open world systems that they developed with Days Gone. So I'm really happy for Ben Studio. End quote. This is something that we knew from reports. We knew from Bloomberg specifically. I believe that was a Jason Schreier report, specifically saying that this is the case. But it's nice to have some more clarification. And it's interesting to see that they're using the term new IP, which makes me think that it's probably not Siphon Filter, which, pour one out. Sadly, we're probably not going to get a new Siphon Filter.
I think this is best news overall for Ben, for PlayStation Studios, and for gamers just as a whole. I am excited for this. I think that Sony Bend is extremely talented, and I think that they just really need to find their horizon. And I think that they've kind of been putting in the work for a while. And Days Gone is one of those perfect examples that it was really good, but it's not PlayStation Studios good. And I think that they have the potential to have a fourth, fifth, sixth pillar, depending on how you're looking at PlayStation Studios, of these heavyweights. And I think a new IP is a very, very exciting premise, especially being on PlayStation 5, and especially who knows? Is this going to be one of the showpiece titles on PS5, or is it going to be cross-gen? Does that actually matter at all? I don't know.
Yeah. I'm super looking forward to it. Just the fact that coming off of the Last of Us remake stuff that we got earlier, it's nice to see that new IPs at PlayStation are still happening, right? Every game isn't going to be The Last of Us. We're not going to have an endless rotation of Last of Us, Horizon, Ghost of Tsushima.
Chicken Little nice. Shit, man. I swear. The sky's always falling. It's just like, yo, guess what? Last of Us is dope. They're going to do dope shit with it. And they're also going to do a whole bunch of other things. I'm not concerned at all. We're about to get a plethora of super high quality PlayStation exclusive games over the next generation. They've proven that to us. Why would we think otherwise?
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. Lastly, for PlayStation updates, Team Asobi is growing. This is Wesley LeBlanc at IGN. Team Asobi has officially announced itself as the newest internal development studio within the PlayStation family. This news comes nearly 4 months after Sony Interactive Entertainment announced that PlayStation Studios' Japan studio will be reorganized and recentered around Team Asobi, the team best known for Astrobot Rescue Mission for PlayStation VR and Astro's Playroom for PlayStation 5. Herman Holst, the head of PlayStation Studios, said today that PlayStation is building Team Asobi in Tokyo, a world-class studio that is developing a franchise for all ages with global appeal. You'll love to see it. I'm very happy about this news. I'm happy that team is growing. They are such a quality team. Astro's Playroom was such a good, technical showpiece for the PlayStation 5, and I'm very excited to see what they continue to make because they're very talented and very good at what they do.
I love it. I love that they're making it official here. I love that they're treating them like a pure PlayStation studio, where it's like, there's level of quality. There's an expectation set here that we are going to deliver. And they've proven multiple times now, whether it's proving to be the breakout hit for PSVR or the tech demo for PlayStation 5. What are they going to do next? What is this franchise for all ages with global appeal? Are they continuing the Astro worlds? I imagine so. But what does an Astro full-on console game look like? We haven't seen that yet. And I think that they have some ideas. I imagine that they got some real great shit up their sleeves.
Do you think there's something there in terms of giving them a franchise that has been dormant for a while? Do you think there's something there in terms of giving Team Asobi a Jak and Daxter or a Sly Cooper?
I think it's possible. This is gonna get me a lot of hate. I don't think that there is an excessive amount of value in those franchises. And I think that if there was, we would have seen a lot more of them. And when we do see them, these things happen a lot, where the mascot era is a bygone era. And there was the retro revival that happened in the last couple of years of Sonic Mania, Crash 4, Crash Insane Trilogy just as a whole, all of that stuff. And they had their kind of their moments, right? And Crash sold extremely well, all this stuff. Well, guess what? I don't know if we're going to see a Crash 5 because it sold well, Crash 4, but did it sell well enough? And that's kind of the big question here is do they just keep going forward with this Astro stuff, with the building this new brand, or do they go back to the well? And I think that what there really is an opportunity to reinvent what those old characters are and introduce them to a whole new generation. I don't think that the fans of the old games, if they were to come back, if that is going to be enough of a groundswell to really move the needle. But at the end of the day, I don't think that it would take away from it either. Like, I think that Team Asobi working on a Jak and Daxter game is just as exciting as them working on an Astro game or some new franchise, because the quality is there because they're good developers.
Yeah, no matter what they do, I hope we continue to see Astrobot, because Astrobot, I think, is such a lovable little guy, lovable character, and I think that game works so well, especially as a showpiece. You know, I hope we get one with PSVR 2 and whatever. PS5 Pro release another Astrobot. You know, let us see what that thing can do. So nice. It's dope. It's hot.
And the last thing I want to say about my point, before I just get completely ripped apart in the comments, and rip me apart, go for it, it's cool, is like Ratchet and Clank's another good example. We haven't seen Ratchet and Clank since 2016, and before that it was 2012. So it's like there's big gaps for these, like, for that type of franchise. And honestly, I'm pretty surprised we got a Ratchet and Clank game this early on PlayStation 5. We could have went the entire generation and had that not happen, period. So I'm happy that there is an interest in these games, and Ratchet's reviewing super well. I expect it's going to sell super well. So I do think that there is a potential of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart specifically kind of opening the door for an interest that I'm saying isn't there for Jak and Daxter or Sly Cooper, that this could create. It could create a demand for this type of game.
Yeah, I think PlayStation has a good thing going in terms of what their catalog of mascot platformers is that they can reach into. Because like Jak and Daxter and Sly Cooper are fairly dormant, but you do have Astro and you do have Little Big Planet and you do have Ratchet that feel like they are this trio of games that they're willing to support and hold up and try to hold up as their, hey, these stand alongside like the other characters that we love, like Nathan Drake and Ellie and all these other ones. Like we see Astro put front and center. We see Sackboy put front and center. We see Sackboy get new games. You know, I think there's something there, especially when you look at the amount of studios that PlayStation is willing to partner with, you know, when it comes to something like Sackboy, or the amount of studios that we don't know what they're doing, you know, Team Asobi, but then also Pixel Opus, which worked on Concrete Genie. It's like, what are they doing? Could you give them a franchise, or are they going to work on something that is family friendly because that's what they've done before? You know, I'm very, very excited to see how they continue to utilize those, because I for sure expect to see more Astrobot. I expect to see more Ratchet, and I also expect to see more Sackboy. Like Sackboy, I think is a fairly liked franchise for PlayStation, even if it doesn't sell gangbusters. I think there's still uses for it to at least fill in the catalog and make things fresh and diverse in the catalog.
I mean, absolutely. PlayStation has spent the last 7 years, I would say, the entire PS4 generation, really kind of building up a portfolio that rivals Nintendo's in so many ways. And you look at Nintendo and it's like they have their IP. What do they do with that IP? They iterate. There's spin-offs. There's different versions of different things. There's 3D Mario, 2D Mario, 2.5D Mario. There's a Yoshi series. There's a Kirby series. All of them platformers to some extent, but they all have a certain vibe. They all have a certain level of, this is a smaller production. This is a Mario Odyssey production. And we understand that. We know what that means. I think PlayStation has the talent, it has the teams, and it has the IP to be able to do all of that in the same way. And they didn't before.
Now it's time for PlayStation picks. This is where I highlight a few of the cool looking games coming to PSN this week. For the big hitters, I'm highlighting both last week and this week, since we missed out on last week. And so a couple of games that came out last week were Wreckfest for the PS5, and then Virtual Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown for the PS4, which is free for PS Plus if you want to check that one out. Virtual Fighter 5, fairly fun. Not my favorite 3D fighting game, but it is a pretty decent one if you want to check that out. For this week, Chivalry 2 is out for PS5 on Tuesday, June 8th. The Elder Scrolls Online is coming to PS5 Tuesday, June 8th. Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is out for PS5 Thursday, June 10th. Ninja Gaiden Master Collection is out for PS4 Thursday, June 10th. Guilty Gear Strive is out for PS5 and PS4 Friday, June 11th. And then Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart for PS5 is coming out Friday, June 11th. As far as the PlayStation picks themselves, Stonefly came out for PS5 and PS4 last week. As a reminder, this is the one that friend of the show Belinda Garcia wrote for. The game description goes like this: harness the wind and soar through the wilderness of Stonefly, a chill and tranquil action-adventure game about self-discovery, legacy, and belonging. Glide your mech strategically among beautiful flora and dangerous fauna, confronting hungry bugs, adventures, and memorable characters. I really like the look of this one. I really like the art style. I've only played about the first hour of it because I got very sidetracked because I was playing a 3D platformer called Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. But for what I played of this, it's a really unique concept. You go into like these bug mech creatures and you fly around and you take out these little bugs that are on the leaves. Really cute game, really fun art style, really cool, unique gameplay that, if this looks like it's up your alley, I would say definitely give it a look. Definitely check it out.
Very cool.
And we also got Operation Tango. That's out for PS5 and PS4. That came out last week, and that is another one that's on PS Plus. It takes two to save the world in this cooperative spy adventure. Pair up with a friend as an agent or hacker with only your voices to connect you, and work together to bring a high-tech global menace to its knees. Operation Tango is a really cool game. I've actually platinumed it. Had to play through it twice to do that, and I was very willing to do so because it is a very fun game. I believe Snowbike Mike and Nick are playing this game on stream. I think I saw that
cool.
in one of the thumbnails.
I think they started that yesterday. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, and like the whole bit of it is it's basically a combination of think It Takes Two meets Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, where you are like one person's the hacker, one person's the agent. If you're the hacker, or if you're the agent, you're usually in the field doing stuff like going through laser rooms or trying to find a certain like ID card to get into an elevator to get into the mainframe room to hack a server or whatever. And if you're the hacker, you're essentially assisting the agent, but it's still a fun time because you would think the hacker would be boring, but they find ways to switch it up to make it so that things feel active and fresh. And it is very much a puzzle game, meanwhile being this being like a little bit of an action game as well. But it is mostly puzzles, but it's fun puzzles. You have to really communicate in it.
A pitch.
Yeah.
Keep Talking, Nobody Explodes with It Takes Two. Wow. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. And a couple things I'll shout out about it too, right? I said it's free with PS Plus. It's free on PS5 with PS Plus, not free on PS4. But if you have the PS5 version, you can use the friend pass to play for free with a friend who may be on PS4. Say if one person has a PS5, other person has a PS4, you can do it that way. And so again, definitely worth checking out. Online only, not split screen, but it's a very fun game that, again, I would recommend. Got the platinum. I'm going to beat Janet Garcia in our platinum race.
What's your third game going to be?
Probably Ratchet and Clank, honestly. Like, I'm close enough that I could probably just do it all the way because I have Operation Tango. I also got Aerial Knight's Never Yield platinum. Yeah. And so now I just have one left, and I think that might as well be Ratchet because I can knock that one out.
Nice.
Ratchet platinum, once you beat the game once, you can platinum the game, especially if you're skipping cutscenes. If you like just get into where you need to go, like in like less than 3 hours, like maybe even an hour.
Let's go.
Yeah,
let's go. Tim, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of PS I Love You XOXO. Another Greg Miller list episode as he prepares to host for E3, but it's all good because it's Hot Boy Summer. Tim has the sunglasses. He's rocking it. He's killing it.
Let's go. I'm about to go eat a sandwich. Bless. I'm excited.
Oh hell yeah. Also, as a reminder, it's E3 week. And so stay tuned to twitch.tv/kindoffunnygames for all the reactions. We're going to react to a lot of the conferences, a lot of the presentations. It's going down over the weekend and the next week. So get hype, get ready for that because it's going to be a good time. Remember, this has been PS I Love You XOXO, your PlayStation podcast. Each and every week, we get together to talk about the hottest topics in PlayStation. We've got a Patreon post show for those that are subbed at the silver level of patreon.com/kindoffunnygames. So stick around for that. Otherwise, until next time, peace out.